Hello, this is Imani, creator of Peep Game Comics. I am the creator of, of course, this is Imani. I'm a creator of Peep Game Comics. You're listening to Black Comics Universe, streaming exclusively on The Experience. And I am here with my friends, Jennings and Damien Duffy.
Hello.
Hello.
What's up, guys? We're in like 3 different time zones here.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. Science.
No, right?
No, but yeah, so I want to get into it. I really wanted to talk to you guys. I saw your announcement for the nomination for the Eisner for Parable of the Sower. The Sower. Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What is it like? Because y'all actually get a lot of nominations and a lot of awards lately. It's like it's becoming a thing. What's it?
I don't know.
Comparably, I think you got to get more than the average creative team. What do y'all attribute your success to?
Well, we pay off the judges right beforehand.
There's also a great deal of blackmail material that is like ridiculously.
Payola. Got it.
Yeah. Anyway,
we've been just really lucky that people enjoy our adaptations of Butler's work. I think is the main thing, and also, I mean, we're lucky to be working with Octavia Butler's stories, which are completely brilliant, and somehow there are still lots of people who haven't heard of her.
Yeah, which is even more implausible, right? I'm like, what? How do you not heard of? Anyway, so I don't know. I think also is that we've been working together for such a long time. It's almost like one person is making it, but you know what I'm saying? It's like there's a huge amount of like empathy towards each other and understanding how we both make stories that I think is very different than most creators too. Yeah, I mean, you do have other creative teams who've been working together for a long time, but Damien and I have been working together for almost 20 years now. It's crazy. It's like 17, 16.
It's long.
It's long. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with that. Like, yeah, there's a comfort level involved in our collaboration, and also I feel like at this point we have such shared goals and shared ideas about what comics are good for that helps us a lot to put out award-worthy adaptations, I guess. But we're up against Gene Yang, which just makes me nervous. That guy he gets lots.
I did not know that. You know what? I'll rescind my congratulations now.
I know, right? It's like, dang.
No, he's a beast.
He's a series. Yeah, I mean, because he adapted Superman Smashes the Klan. That's
No, there are a lot of great books out there. I mean, like, it's an amazing time for graphic novels, for graphic adaptations, and hopefully we destroy everyone else. But you never know.
Yeah. But it's really, I mean, we're up for like 3 awards with that one book. So that's the Ignite Award, the Eisner, and the Hugo actually too, which is I'm still in shock about too.
Yeah, that caught me off guard for sure.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, I don't know. All these always catch me off guard where I'm just like, we
just want to. I mean, again, and we've said this many times. We just want to make something that people don't hate us for. You know what I'm saying? That, because Octavia Butler's work is so beloved, and who are we to try to make anything with her work? And I
want to talk about that creative process as far as creating a visual work around her work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been a fan ever since I picked up Wild Seed, right?
Yeah.
And I immediately started picking up all of the Imago, that trilogy, and what's interesting about as an artist myself, I've always wondered what these characters would look like and how this could be illustrated, and I've always that crossed my mind, like this would make an awesome graphic novel and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What was that process like for you guys, trying to visualize her work? Did you have additional material from her estate that you could use to sort of step into her mind or the state of mind in the work that she created?
So we didn't really have additional work other than what was like publicly available. But I think in part that might be to our benefit, because I will read interviews where she talks about the novel and her ideas about the novel.
Right.
But if you go into her personal papers, there's like alternate versions of multiple novels. Like she wrote Kindred like 2 or 3 times.
Right.
So I think there's a danger of falling too far down the rabbit hole.
Okay.
Get in the way of that creative process. But the kind of something I think that with Kindred showed us we were on the right track. I mean, it had already come out and people liked it, but we went to the Huntington Library where they have her personal papers, and they had 2 photos from a magazine, one from an ad and one from like a fashion shoot. And it was it was Kevin and Dana, the 2 main characters from the 70s in Kindred, and they looked very close to what John had drawn.
It was obviously like Kevin and Dana, and we were like, "Yo, this is Kevin and Dana," And we, as soon as we saw them, because what happened was when we were there, one of the docents or one of the researchers did a special presentation just on Kindred, and had a lot of her stuff out. And as Damien stated, these 2 photos and a Manila photo were like looking at us, and we recognized them as the main characters. It was crazy, or 2 of the main characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so something we must be clicking, but as Damien is saying, I mean, we did a lot of our external research. A lot of the research was just, paying attention to what she put on the page, listening to it, trying to figure out ways to tell it better. Damien actually, when he was doing research when he was listening to Kindred, one of the things he always talked about was like, yo, this story is actually a lot more complex than it actually even seemed.
Well, both of them really because the way she writes narrative time, it works great in a novel, and you don't notice how interwoven and complex it is until you have to take it apart for a comic. Because it'll be talking about somebody's something's happening to the character, and it's like, that reminded me of a thing that happened 3 months ago, and she'll just slip that in there, and it builds up, and it's very smooth if you're just reading the prose just to enjoy the story. But technically with comics, you kind of want linear bits of narrative. It doesn't work the same way.
Exactly.
So that's when you start zooming in, you realize just how intricately she wove everything together. So that's why I had to read the books so many times. And also it takes at least for me 5 or 6 read-throughs before I start pulling out. I know I've sort of gotten to a next level in thinking about the adaptation when I start pulling out subtext, or when I start saying this event is a metaphor for more literary criticism kind of observations.
Right. The close reading, and then you do a close writing. so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So critical making exercise was like, okay, these are things that I think she was trying to get to, because she does have major themes, around hierarchies, around power structure,
Yes.
these types of things. But Damien's
A lot
right.
of strong female leads.
Yeah,
That's like encouraging.
definitely very socially conscious, and
Mhm.
they're very much about like, definitely like the parable books are much about like warning the world of impending doom. Like she was trying to create, stories that were prescient on purpose, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
It was a "If This Goes On" type of story, which there's like the famous, it's like Robert Heinlein or somebody, I forget, maybe Bradbury, one of those like famous science fiction authors. But they said there's like 3 types of science fiction stories, and it's the "If This Goes On" is like the sort of using speculative fiction to warn about like present circumstances and where they're heading. And yeah, so Parable of the Sower, that is very much about that. And then I was just going to say, like, going along with like having to dig sort of themes or like central metaphors and stuff out. Like, I think maybe one reason people have responded to the work is that when we pull those out, we don't just like throw them out or just like repeat them in the same way, but we figure out how to do things, how to call them on like those metaphors or those subtexts, like visually or like through visual sequence rather than just through text. So it's pulling out really sort of deep thematic content and figuring out how to use like pictures to sort of imply that or show that or to like add that dimension in a different way.
That's one of the things I was actually amazed by when I picked up Parable. I was amazed how thick it is. Like, I don't feel like you guys left out anything,
dude. Like, let me tell you, like, when I read his script, I was like, okay, I just read Parable of the Sower as a comic book. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. This is not a graphic novel. This is like a visual book. This is what it feels like to me. That's what it is. It's not a.
I'm glad to hear that, because there was a lot I did leave out, especially like for some reason in that book, she thought it'd be a great idea to introduce like 11 characters in the last like 20 pages. I remember freaking out when I was working on that. I was like, wait, there's all these people? And like, you have to introduce all of them. And so some of them kind of got less backstory, but
this is close to 300 pages. This is not a graphic.
Well, no,
don't pick this up if you think you're just going to use this as a shortcut. No, this is the real deal.
My father-in-law said it about like the Kindred book. He was like, "Yo, this is not like the comics." That was, he was not expecting.
Right.
Like, I had to actually read this in several sittings. He was like, I couldn't. It was a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
No,
and that's what. And I like that about the way you guys approached it. It's like you didn't necessarily look to, abbreviate it or amend it or anything like that.
No.
We were very much like, we didn't want to do just a Classics Illustrated version of the novel.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big thing. Like when we started Kindred and with Parable of the Sower also, is like, we were just like, if we're doing it with comics, let's do the things comics can do best and like use the affordances of comics to tell a story.
Exactly.
I had to get out of this habit. Can you guys, because I bring on people that I'm always so comfortable with, and I don't actually do a good job introducing things. The book in and of itself, can you guys give us a description as to what this book is about? Like what Octavia wrote and what you guys put together?
About the end of the world. I'm just kidding. Not exactly.
Well, sort of.
Sort of. Yeah.
Okay. So Parable of the Sower, it's about a young woman, Lauren Oya Alamina, who's in basically now, is written in the 90s, takes place in the 2020s.
2024, I believe.
2024 is where it starts, and takes place in an America that's broken apart by like income inequality and environmental catastrophe and
disease
and wage slavery. So it's obviously completely fictional. No overlap with reality.
It's not like there's not climate change. Just this,
right.
Anyway, yeah. So it's about that. But no. So Lauren Olamina, she is sort of growing up in a lower middle class neighborhood in California that's walled off because outside there's all these street poor, many of whom are also like violent and
drug addicted,
right. Dangerous. And it's about how first she survives in her neighborhood within the wall, and then how she has to survive outside her neighborhood, traveling across California, and all the while inventing this new religion, or she says rather discovering this new religion, Earthseed, which functions on the precept that God is change, and everything you have to do in life is accounting for perpetual change.
Yep.
How's that?
Yeah.
No, that's good.
I think that was awesome.
And I know that we were talking about recurrent themes with Octavia Butler. Another one of her recurrent themes is community. She always builds communities around her protagonists.
Yeah.
What was it about these, Kindred and Parable of the Sower? And you guys are doing Parable of Talent too?
That's correct. Yeah, we're in the middle of that now. I mean, actually.
Yeah. What was it about those books that drew you guys opposed to is it called the Xenogenesis or the I've always been a fan of that series or the or Wild Seed?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, it just turns out that when we were
we love babies here. Yeah.
It's his birthday, right?
It's his birthday, so he gets to make
Yeah. Let him talk. He has stuff to say.
So it just turns out that we were the story kind of chose us, like Kindred in particular. Like we had already tried to get at one particular point and we're unsuccessful when Beacon Press wanted to do the book and someone else got the right to do it, and then it didn't happen. And then Damien and I actually ended up being selected to do it when Abrams got the rights to Kindred as a graphic novel. So essentially, we didn't have a choice as far as like the first book. It was actually funny. It's like we were actually doing a panel about Black comics, which is behind you actually at San Diego Comic-Con, and I was walking around trying to pitch other things that we were working on. And yeah, I rolled up on Abrams and I was trying to see if they wanted to publish anything that we were working on. And Sheila Keenan, who was the senior editor at the time, was like, "Yo, I'm working on trying to get this book. Are you familiar with Octavia Butler?" And I was like, "Yes." Yeah. And I'm actually, "What book are you trying to do?" And then she said Kindred. And then I remembered, as I was picking my job off the ground, that other book had never happened. This is actually about what, Damien, like 3 or 4 years after
it was like I think 3 years after. So there was this open call in like 2009 that we tried to get the job to adapt Kindred then. We did not get it. It was with a different publisher. It was going to be a black and white adaptation,
and hardly any more pages. I mean, it was like 100. It was small.
Yeah. In retrospect, probably for the best, but so we didn't get the job the first time, and then just sort of out of the blue, John happened to talk to Sheila Keenan, and when she looked at his art, was like, "Hey, you ever heard this Kindred book?" And it's like, "Yeah, we thought we would never get to do that."
Wow. So
it just kind of circled back around to us in this so it in a way it felt like it chose us.
Yeah. No, it's for like the parable books. I mean, when we saw what was going to happen with our previous president being elected, we just felt that it was our responsibility to do Parable of the Sower and Parable of Talents, because, as you know, there's a character, a president in the second book named President Jarrett, that is kind of like if Trump and Pence were like fused together in some crazy experiment. You know what I'm saying? If you think about it, because he had the populist like charisma of a Trump with the hyper, evangelical, notions of a Mike Pence.
Okay, right.
But, yeah. So I don't know. It just seemed like it was the right thing to do those two books. I mean, my favorite story of hers is Wild Seed, and we would love to do that, but that's why. Those are the
When I finished the script for Parable of the Talents, which John's working on the art now, it was right before the shelter-in-place orders came down during the pandemic. And so the president character that John's talking about comes to power under the slogan "Make America Great Again," and is like a fascist. So it really felt like I finished Parable of the Talents, and then I went to go live in it.
Exactly.
Wow. But I mean, it just really speaks to how prescient Butler was in those writings, and how important her warnings about, sort of unchecked capitalism, rise of fascism, poverty, racism, sexism, like everything she was talking about in those is even more important now, since we're really dealing with it right now. Like, she was pretty spot on with a lot of her predictions of what 30 years from when she was writing the book would be like.
Yep.
And I think just for me to, show my educated chops here, I think that her more science fiction titles have like sort of give a solution to that. Like her answer to all that stuff is like she totally genetically remakes humanity. You know what I mean? So it's like she basically finds a way to wipe the slate clean and creates all new species around the human race, in her other books. Not that I don't think it's like necessarily the timeline, or they're not necessarily connected, but it does feel like when you get into her more like I guess, for lack of a better term, like space type titles, it seems like she's sort of like remaking society. If Parable of the Sower and Parable of Talents in those books it's a discussion about the current society, she's sort of like reimagining what society could be like in those books.
Yeah, and then like because the Xenogenesis trilogy, especially like Dawn and Adulthood to Write Some, they like the conflict is that humans don't want to be fixed,
right?
Because like the thing is, it's her thing that humans are dangerous because they're an intelligent species that can only think in hierarchies.
Right.
And the aliens like are going to take that out, like the hierarchical thinking, but humans don't want to lose that.
They don't want to lose it. Exactly.
Right.
But no, you're exactly right. Like Parable of the Sower is definitely really highlighting a lot of the problems that she tries to solve with some of the like alien characters, or like the I don't know, godlike, Doro and Wanyu and Wild Seed. And,
Wild Seed.
Yeah, but then like. Yeah, but it seems like she always does come back to the fact that, but humans don't want this.
Exactly. This is
burn everything down world.
Right. And this is why we like this again. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Hard-headed we are.
Right. Exactly. This is where I reset the room here real quick. You're watching Black Comics Universe presented by Peep Game Comics, exclusively here on the Experience. Please help us out by hitting share and giving us a like and follow. Then make sure to tune in for our original programming 7 days a week. The Black Comics Universe streams every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on all DSPs. And again, I am joined by John Jennings and Damien Duffy, creators of the creative talents behind Octavia Butler's adaptation of Parable of the Sower. And we can bring that image up now, Kyle, whenever you get a chance. But it's interesting. You guys are one of the first people I met. There you go. Sorry, it's covering everybody's face. It covered my face, which was great.
It kind of
You guys were one of the first people I met when I first got into comics, or got into the comic book industry, or whatever you want to call it. And you guys have seen far more of this than I have. What has, especially with this book here, Black Comics, and I've used this book. This is a book that you guys. What year did you guys publish this?
2010, I think.
Yeah, 2010. Yep.
It seems like an eternity ago.
Yeah, I think it is an eternity ago.
And this is the first volume, by the way.
Yes,
the
first volume. Yeah,
it's 2 volumes. But you guys, so you guys have been watching. When you talk about that's volume 2, there you go. So when we talk, and it's been interesting, I've been talking to a lot of Black comic book creators and that have been on either end of the timeline. So it's like people that I've met, say 10 years ago, or I knew that were into this, say, 15 or 20 years ago, till now, where I'm talking to people that are just now getting into this, into not just comics, but into Black comics. It's like, what has it been like for you guys to sort of watch this overall process, not just for you guys' own personal success, but just following the success and how, people have been coming into this industry? What's it been like?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, because you're right. I mean, I think what happened was, like I said, Damien and I started out as experimental comics makers and independent comics makers, like as far as like our own personal practice and research. But then also the curatorial process kind of brought us to looking at, African American independent comic arts, or, more broadly known as the Black comics, the Black Age of Comics movement. And yeah, I mean, it definitely has been a really interesting evolution. I think a lot has transpired from us getting involved in that space too, because, one of the things we realized is like, man, no one's really like, people need to know more about this space, which is why we made the first Black comics book to start with. And then, kind of participate in that space as curators and as practitioners, and also creating new spaces where people could create wealth, or not wealth, but, make some money at least. I mean, cultural wealth, but, like the Schomburg and, SoulCon and things like that, where you needed to actually increase space. So those spaces have increased as well. I think as the internet and expanded as far as like social media spaces and also having access to the tools to make these things has happened too, like, and actually inspiring people like yourself to create like distribution networks. I mean, I think that's what's happened is like these like small, like grassroots things have now become like part of the ecosystem that pushes some of the larger things too, because now you're seeing like, the big 2 hiring folk from that, that pool of people, for instance, people that we've known all out, for the last, 12, 13 years are now writing for DC Comics and stuff like that, which I found is really interesting. But anyway, yeah, I think it's been really exciting, and I really do think that a lot of what's happened in the independent side of things have pushed the envelope as far as like Black speculative culture globally. They'll never admit to it, but I think that, there's always been like an eye on what's been happening in these independent spaces. So what do you think, Damien?
Yes. I had a few different things. One thing, it's just silly, but John, like you're talking about, like some of the people who we highlighted in the Black comics books or in some of the art shows we curated, they've gone on to like write and draw for DC or Marvel or do work in like Hollywood and stuff.
Image, yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Every time I see like a social media post about that, I'm just always like, I told you.
Right. Yeah.
In your face.
In your face, industry. No, but I mean, I think it's gratifying that we got to be a part of helping more people just become aware of the wealth and diversity of talent that was always there and always working in this sort of independent Black comic space. And yeah, I mean, like, I think that's probably like been my biggest takeaway is just, I always feel real lucky that I get to see young artists just coming up and like see where that their trajectory is and like how successful they've grown. And then also that, I don't know, like this opportunity to and it's kind of similar to what we're doing with Octavia Butler's books too. There's this aspect of carrying forth like a legacy or making people more sort of culturally aware and historically aware of the types of work that has always gone on.
Yes,
right.
Even though it's not
and
always.
we didn't just start here. This is part of a continuum. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was on this Comic-Con panel because this book about comic art museums reprinted an article I wrote when John and I were curating our our first and second big sort of comic art shows. And I hadn't really thought about it for a long time, but a lot of this was brought on by the Masters of American Comics art exhibition.
Correct.
It was like, it set up the canon of like 12 masters of comics. And we had a lot of arguments with it because it was all dudes and 11 white dudes. But even beyond that, it was also that it like Kaz Comics is like this one single strand, right? Like you start with early 20s comics, you get to like underground and like Raw and Mouse and stuff, and you're done. You got it. You understand. And our thing was like, no, it's like a tapestry. It's
right.
a huge tapestry. It's a living and growing medium. And in a lot of ways is just, getting going in the last 10 years,
right.
especially in this country. So, I think all in all, just to be able to sort of like look at those moments and expand notions of what the history of comics is and what the potential for comics is, especially in that Black independent space. That's what has been great to see all that transpire.
I've been. No, it's interesting because I've been trying to explain to people that for a lot of folks now, it seems like everything they see it as things started after Black Panther, and I'm trying to
right.
Yeah.
And I try to explain to people and say, well, no, I will say at least 5 years, if not 10 years before Black Panther, you could definitely see how there was momentum being built. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
SoCon was like at least 2 years, prior to Black Panther. People like there were certain Kickstarters that were very successful of Black independent comics, before Black Panther. It was like the community was growing, so by the time that actually that film came out, if you're going to use that, you can definitely use that as a hallmark, but
a watershed.
It's definitely a watershed moment. But by that time, the community itself had built up a ton of momentum.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, because I would say that this new iteration of Afrofuturism, Black interest in Black speculative culture started like in the early 2000s, and started to really, honestly, like gain a lot of momentum in the underground spaces, but also in the academy, which is weird. I mean, like, I talk about this all the time. It's like when you look at like how hip hop culture kind of got away from us. The academy. When I say the academy, I mean like people who are in university settings, teachers like myself, researchers who are studying popular culture, kind of look down their noses at hip hop. And now, of course, you have archives at like places like Harvard and where's the other one? Upstate New York, Ithaca.
Yeah.
That's cool. I can't even think of the name of school right now. But, we started studying it after it had affected culture so much. And to me, it's like part of one of the things that started driving this interest in Black speculation, Black speculative culture, because I definitely count comics as part of that, was coming from like, geeks like myself who happen to be teaching classes and stuff like that. We were talking about this way before Black Panther broke, and I would even count Get Out as a major moment too, because Get Out is a sci-fi horror movie. I mean, it's political satire, but also it's science fiction and speculative in nature. Those two films, I think, together help really, really open up the floodgates, so to speak, and usher in a new movement of like Black speculative culture in all media, across all media forms, And now I think. So go ahead. What I was going to finish with was like, because all of these different things are not happening in isolation anymore. I mean, basically, it used to be like, oh, there's this one Black nerd at this high school, and who loved Doctor Who and also loved, Parliament Funkadelic, right? But now you have like these massive collections of like, people from all backgrounds who love Black creative culture, And now it's become like an international movement. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because of being connected through the web and other spaces. So yeah. What are you going to say, Damien? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just going along with that. I think you can also sort of trace kind of like a generational growth, or like how there's sort of a generational exponential growth of interest in Black speculative fiction. If you think about like early 90s, that's when Mark Derry kind of codified Afrofuturism as a term.
That's right.
And that's when like the Black Age of Comics movement started. That's when Milestone Media came out.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, there's kind of ebbs and flows in this, but like you can see sort of the seeds there that were planted sort of taking root and growing with that kind of next generation that John and I were involved in kind of cataloging and shedding light on.
That's correct.
And then, you know, along with sort of the growth in media and the growth of comics, or at least superhero comics and sort of mainstream consciousness, I think some of that, there's like a generational narrative that sort of goes along with it. Why it's so upfront now and so sort of explode, or seems like it's exploding now.
Yeah. It seems like it's kind of like Beyonce's success, right? Where it's like people forget about all of the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of practice, and the fact that she was in Destiny. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, oh, she's an overnight success. I was like, no.
Right.
It took you maybe like 15, 20 years to become an overnight success.
If we play some Destiny Child songs now for some kids,
they'd be like,
they would hate it. Yeah,
exactly. I was thinking about this too. Is like someone who I think is really a key factor, and we talk about him in our first book, is Omar Bilal, right? Okay. Omar Bilal and the Museum of Black Superheroes, you know, Hero Talk.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's a huge part of this because it was one of the first like online spaces where a lot of the people who are now, you know, the it people could talk about art, could talk about politics, talk about community, could get into fights, you know, all kinds of stuff. And there were a lot of fights. And then I think what started happening was when Facebook became Facebook and started having like these groups, you know, you didn't necessarily need that one space as much because you needed more voices and stuff. And I think that's why he actually ended up shutting it down because it started spinning off into these other things. But I think that a lot of attention and respect need to be paid to Omar Bilal. People like him, people like Yumi Odom, as well, you know, and Tertel Only, people who started spaces where we could come together and talk to each other. You know, I think is really what kind of generated the community that we have now, which is now a global community. You know.
I've been telling a lot of creators like I can't wait for like when we got together in person. It was really a lot of fun, but I think this next iteration of cons, because there's been a lot of energy in the community virtually, because you know we've all been stuck online. But I think this next salvo of Comic Cons, it's going to be kind of crazy as far as actually meeting a lot of people in person. At least it's for me. I'm actually kind of excited.
No, it's gonna. I mean, honestly, once the floodgates are open and people feel safe and stuff, I really do think it's gonna be kind of like what happened with the Roaring '20s. You know what I'm saying? That's because after the Spanish flu outbreak? Is that what it was? Yes, after Spanish flu outbreak, people were like, "Yo, we need to get busy." It's like, I mean,
it's hot vax summer, yo. Hot vax summer.
Exactly.
Hot facts up.
That's what you're saying on the internet, which is why I don't go on the internet.
Hot vax summer? Is that what it said?
Yeah, that's a thing.
I'm actually surprised I got in touch with you on Facebook, Damien, because I didn't think I was going to be able to reach you. But
I know, like, you know, I'll pop on there, but I just honestly, a lot of it was Parable of the Sower. When I was writing that, I really had to get off social media because it was the combination of the two. And feeling like what I was writing in the comic was sort of also happening on the news was really depressing.
Can you speak to that? Because I've been, me and my brother, we just curated a virtual show for Juneteenth for the Toledo Museum of Art.
Yeah.
And we got to pick. Now they have a lot of work in their collection that is not necessarily on display, but it's very some interesting. So there's one of Kara Walker's books is actually a part of their collection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a little talk. We all did like a little talk about each piece. And I was talking about her work. And I've been looking at a lot of her work. And like, there's a lot of documentaries on YouTube and stuff. Yes. And if you ever seen her work, it's very, she takes these traditional Southern scenes and she basically defiles them. She takes, she shows it from the Black slave narrative, and she basically turns it up on its end. It's very horrific. It's very uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes, it is.
She intentionally, does this. And I was thinking about how her creative process, and I was thinking like, somewhere in there, it's not enough. It wouldn't be enough to sort of act like in order to make the scenes that she makes, it almost seems as if she actually has to hate the Black body, like it, at least for a moment, in the sense that she would have to have a genuine. It has to be genuine for it to really work. She can't just pretend like this is how this is all going to happen and all these things fall into place. Somewhere in there, you actually have to get into the mind of not just the slave, but the mind of the slave owner.
Thinking about her work, that's an interesting statement.
And I wonder, like, especially for you guys, delving into this work, is it somewhere in there? Do you find yourself like, okay, this is too much. I have to, and like, Kara Walker says, as in one of the, because you have to read a lot of slave narratives from slave masters and historical accounts. And she basically had to, decompress after a while. It's like she couldn't, talk to people, or she actually literally had to like sort of disconnect herself in order to recover from it. Is it parts of, and I know Octavia Butler is notorious for writing scenes that can get you like that.
Yes.
And like, how did you guys handle that stuff? How did you guys sort of like, how do you guys handle that material?
Yeah. So what you're talking about with Kara Walker makes me think of this notion of embodiment, where you have to embody like particular points of view in order to sort of truthfully make art about them. Yeah. And there, Ebony Flowers, I don't know if you know her work, but she did this graphic novel called Hot Comb. Or it's like a book of short stories, rather. But she also did this kind of academic, partly drawn as a comic article talking about embodiment and how when you draw stuff, you're literally embodying it. When you think in that mindset, you are bringing it in. So it makes me think of that. It also makes me think of the whole ethos of Earthseed, that all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. Yeah. And yeah, so anyway, both of those like big concepts were weighing on me a lot in the writing of Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And yeah, I would have to get away from, so I had to get away from social media. I tried to look at less news, which in the pandemic is hard when it's like, oh, if I have all the information, I'll be less anxious, which is not true. So I did sort of intentionally disconnect a bit from social media and the news just to like focus on the work and try to make sure that while the stories do reflect very strongly our current historical moment, I didn't want to get too far into like, I want to make this about Trump or something. You know what I mean? I want to make this about COVID. Right. I wanted to make sure to stay true to the more sort of universal ideas that she was using fiction to talk about. So yeah, just doing that. And then also I work at this microbrewery down the street. So some beer, that helped me a bit. I was in therapy for a little while, which I'll probably go back to at some point, but like it definitely required me to do a lot of more thinking about being intentional about the sort of news, that parts of the outside world that I'm paying close attention to, the stuff that I'm letting in, just sort of like reallocating where my mental space was, if that makes sense.
No, I understand.
I think on Kindred, that's the one that really messed me up because I was in a lot of, I felt like I would, was enslaved by the book. It was crazy. Like there were moments where I was like, shook by the descriptions that I was trying to draw, like the types of the pain and torture that we had to inflict upon people, it was actually, weeping on the original art, that kind of stuff as I was drawing it. This one was difficult too, because I was like, as Damien's saying, I mean, we're making this book about what could happen or what might be happening in front of us. And then, at the same time, my wife is pregnant with Jackson, who just turned 2 today, like we said. And so you're making this terrible reality, and you're waiting for this little black boy to be born into this terrible reality, So to me, it was very, very stressful. And and like Damien, I mean, I went into therapy and stuff like that too, and I do intend to go back into therapy as well. But I think the saving grace is like my wife she's basically like, all right, turn off the light, no more working on this particular day. There's hell to pay. Like she's very much like, no, you cannot continue to work like this, or something's going to break, that kind of stuff. Like even though it freaked us out, I mean, she made me go on a cruise in the middle of the creation of Kindred, for instance.
And I was totally fine. I was
not
concerned
fine
at all.
She made us go on a cruise. I don't even remember exactly where we went. She's like, no, we're going on a cruise. I'm like, oh, what? Do you understand? Oh, that was the most stressful things.
Like
ever.
Kindred, John physically injured him. Like he hurt his shoulder drying.
I'm still like not right.
The level of like sleep deprivation that we both put ourselves on. Like
I drew Kindred in Sharpie, so I was high most of the time on Sharpie fumes. It was ridiculous.
Oh wow! It's like that's one thing I do like a lot. I like a lot about your process. Your guys' process is like you guys never approach comics in a traditional way.
No,
it's like
no.
But I think it's good to, and I'm glad that I met people like you when I first got into this, because if not, I would still be trying to like figure out, okay, how do I draw on bristle board, and I got to have all the right tools, like all the tools that are in the front side of how to draw the Marvel way. I was still trying to. I had to get all the boards and the paper.
I think we've all been there.
Yes,
we all. Yeah.
Now it's like I make comics on the 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It's like it's more about the process than it is about it has to be just so. But it's something about your guys' process that always made it like okay to like, take risks that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, we love comics hard. Even if sometimes they don't love us back.
But we also, I mean, you're right. Like we're always very like whatever we have to do to get it done. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
More so than it needs to be a certain way, and maybe that's part of too. I was talking about the art exhibition we were reacting against. I mean, all those are straight up traditional ink on Bristol board things, and both of us were like, but there's all this other
amazing
stuff.
Right.
Yeah. We had gallery comics in that show. We had like web comics printed on, board. We talked about process a lot. We had, it was just really the diversity of not only the medium, but who was making comics and how they were being disseminated, Yeah. Honestly, still very proud of that show. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Imani.
Yeah.
No. I got about 10 minutes left or so, and I wanted to make sure I got this in. So you guys are college professors that actually teach a lot of this material. And it's like, yes. I don't think a lot of people, I think that's one of the hugest, I don't know how to describe it. Like one of the hugest things like people don't know about this culture is like academia, just academia built around this.
Yes.
There are scholars that are, that discuss this and actually get paid to basically be professional fans of
right.
basically pop culture,
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about going back to school and, doing what you guys do, because I think there's actually a place for more dialogue around it
Yes.
You guys want to, there's an Eisner for like, scholarly discourse around comics.
Yep.
What is that world like, and how would someone, to say, well, I can't draw, I can't write, but it's like, I'm a fan and I'm a scholar. It's like, maybe this might be, something I can get into. What would be, how would you say they should approach it?
You should go first, since you have a PhD in library information science.
So I have a PhD in library and information science. I'm also an adjunct lecturer. I teach maybe 1 to 2 classes a semester, and I have no job security or make much money. So I'm, it's not all perfect, but I mean, part of it was when I was going through, I sort of fell backwards into library and information science. I was getting the master's as more like a professional degree because I was already working in a library. But I did the thing that I always do, even when especially when I tell myself I'm not going to, is I put comics in everything. So whatever class I was in, if I could relate comics or graphic novels to the final project, and that ended up growing into a dissertation about online comics. So I mean, like, I guess my general statement would be, there is space for comics in basically any field. Any field, like, fields will approach it differently. You may face more resistance if you're trying to be like the first person to do a comic about particle physics or something, although there might be one of those. But, like in library and information science, there was more leeway, especially because graphic novels and manga and libraries was such kind of a big growing subject when I was in grad school. But all of which is just to say that there's like lots of different avenues where you can study comics, publish scholarly work about comics. It doesn't necessarily have to just be like, English or pop culture studies or whatever, like art, graphic design, or like things you would traditionally think of. Like, there is a lot of space, and there's there's like a lot of growing spaces for comics in lots of different fields. So I think that's one thing to consider, is like, what field are you really drawn to? What field do you really want to study in? And how could you combine that with your interest in comics? I think that might be like a useful place to start.
Okay. I totally agree. Like, for me, I have an MFA, which is terminal in art. And I started working in graphic design, and just always had an interest in media studies and in like understanding symbolism and, how these things happen. And also curation, these different things, and publishing. So, and I taught graphic design for like 20 years, as a professor in, research one institutions. And then when I made a transition out here to California, I was approached not by a graphic design program, but by a media and cultural studies program, because it is highly interdisciplinary. It was funny because when Nalo Hopkinson was trying to recruit me to come work here, we don't have a design program at UCR, and art didn't understand what to do with me. They were like, "We don't even what this dude is doing." MCS, my program, was like, "Oh, we totally understand what he's doing." Like, come here. And I was like, you know what? I've actually found that being in a media studies program has been a lot more liberating for me with my own personal work, And in fact, just got a promotion actually fairly recently for my research and work,
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. So and it fits. And so I teach an intro to comics class, like an intro to comics course, and then also classes on, essentially Black sci-fi, horror, and I teach a whole class just on Black superheroes now, So those kind of things. So, but it's because, like what Damien's saying, there's become like a more of an interest in comics as a field. What's about to happen is comics is about to become its own area of study. That's what's about to happen, because as Damien was saying, these particular classes were in English, they were in other spaces. And now what's happened is that because comics has become such a powerful force globally, it's worthy of studying as its own separate thing now,
Okay.
Yep.
And that's actually going to lead me to my last question, is like, where do you see, you you guys have been on this for the last 15, 20 years. It's like, where do you see this headed? And I think that's definitely a perfect direction to go.
Really quickly, I think that both of us have spent a great deal of our professional lives as facilitators and as curators and as translators, and I think for us personally, I think our next the next level for us is putting out more of our own ideas, more of our own intellectual property, which we're in the middle of doing now, and collaborating and growing as a creative force. Yeah, that's what I think for us personally. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I see.
Similar. I guess just in the general question of like where are Black independent comics, where are comics going, where's comic scholarship going, where are we going? I think the answer is everywhere.
Yeah. Well said, sir.
No, that's definitely the way definitely the way to drop the mic.
That's right. Hot back summer. Was hot back summer?
Hot back. What?
Vex hot summer.
I don't know.
It sounds like hot wax, which is like, why? What's happening?
Hot vax summer.
World.
And it's summer. It's
vaccine, like hot vax summer.
It looks like the vaccine. Because there was like hot girl summer, I guess, was it hashtag?
Right. Summer, like SUMMAH. Summer.
Yeah, summer. No, all right. So, So we're right up on it. For John Jennings and Damien Duffy, I am Imani Latif, and this is Black Comics Universe, and we are out.
Thank you.